Hello! I mean, is this what the season's going to be? Every game down to the wire. It feels like it. I mean, I'll take it. I feel so alive. From the studio in Nitro, West Virginia, this is Unreasonable Doubt. It's a podcast about West Virginia University basketball. I'm Josh Witt. West Virginia in a loaded battle for Atlantis field. They leave with 2 wins. They finish 3rd place, and they do it by beating Arizona 83-76 in overtime. Didn't you have a sense this was going to go, is it? It should prepare you, the first 2 games going to overtime, when West Virginia's up 5. Did you think it was going to end in regulation? That's how typical games go. Like, they're 40 minutes and they end after 40 minutes of play. And yet, here we are, 3 games, 3 days, 3 overtimes. And you go into this one, Ed Andre 3000, street clothes, not available to play. You've already played 2 overtime games in 2 days, 90 minutes, and you're even more shorthanded. And I'm just watching in the second half and like, okay, 7 minutes left. West Virginia could just stop scoring and it'd be disappointing, but you could understand it, because, 3 games in a row in 3 days and extra minutes and not a deep team. And this team isn't going to do that. They took a halftime lead against Arizona. Arizona played at West Virginia's pace. West Virginia had the halftime lead, had a 10-point lead with about 10 or 11 minutes left. Let that slip away. I told you that 5-point lead disappeared. And somehow in overtime, have enough energy to come through and beat Arizona in overtime. Yes, every game went to overtime, so a cynic could say, well, you could have left this 0-3. And what I would say to that cynic is, I'd still feel good about this team if they left 0-3 in 3 overtimes. But that didn't happen. I can feel even better than that because West Virginia won 2 of their 3 games in overtime, and I'll spin it the other way. They could have won this thing. The key stat today, points off turnovers. West Virginia's done a great job all season of getting points off turnovers. Today, 24 points off of turnovers compared to Arizona's 6. If you boil it down to one stat, that's the big difference today. I'm watching last season Josh Schertz at Indiana State play Darren DeVries' Drake team. I'm watching Schertz. But when you watch Drake, I'm watching how they play offense, not really paying attention to the defense. The defense was the constant in these 3 games, especially in the first and last. I mean, Arizona scored 104 against Davidson on Wednesday. They get held to 66 in regulation. WVU, only 2 bigs, only 3 bigs, none of them 7 foot, and you out-rebound Gonzaga and you out-rebound Arizona. 3 more offensive rebounds than the Wildcats. And in key moments, as West Virginia's building that lead in the second half, they're doing it on second chances and getting offensive rebounds. The big difference today, besides rebounding and points off turnovers, is one of the coaches, when they panned in on him, was standing. That was Coach DeVries. He's clapping, he's directing, he's energetic. He does move in silence, but on the court, he doesn't move in silence. And his energy is awesome. And it felt like every time you panned over to Tommy Lloyd, he's sitting on the bench. Is that a big deal? Is it a big deal that Tommy Lloyd's sitting every time they pan in on him? Maybe not. I might be exaggerating that a little bit, but it seems like, based on one game in the Bahamas, I don't want a sitting coach. If I had to choose between Tommy Lloyd sitting and Darren DeVries standing and animated, I'd go with Darren DeVries. Yes, Bob Huggins was on a stool, but most of the time he was standing. So it was rebounding, it was defense, and it was the coach that was standing, right? I just wouldn't feel good. I wouldn't feel good with the sitting coach. Yeah, I mean, I bet if we looked at Beeline stuff, he said a bunch. I'll move on. This tournament erased the concerns we had after the Pitt game. And you go into this one, you know Javon had played 85 minutes in 24 hours. You can't expect him to Superman cape it 3 games in a row. And Tucker DeVries has his best shooting performance of the season. And somehow Tommy Lloyd sitting there was like, you know what? We'll let Tucker DeVries get clean looks off. Yes, some of them was at the half-court logo. But some of them was just like a step back from the three-point line. And he was getting clean looks. He made a bunch of them. That was a bad idea. I would have stood up and said, hey, get a hand in that guy's face. Because Tucker shot 8 for 12 from 3, including the first points in overtime. He finished with 26 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists. Stayed in the game when he struggled again, this time with foul trouble. Toby Okani's had an amazing week. Kind of feeling his way out early on. Today, his best offensive performance by far. Makes a 3 late in regulation. Scores 5 points in overtime, including a key 3 from that corner. Big offensive rebounds in the second half. Played great defense. He finishes with 20 and 5. Amani Hansberry, another guy who had a big week. Big offensive rebounds as well. Shot his required 4 threes. West Virginia has not lost in regulation when Amani shoots his 4 threes. He finishes with a double-double, 13 points, 10 rebounds. And those guys pulled the slack for Javon Small, but Javon Small coming back down to earth is 14 points and 8 assists. And he still played 43 minutes. It's not like DeVries can sit him a bunch. He played a bunch and made a step back. But 8 assists tonight. Can he hold up this season with this workload? Because I think hopefully they don't keep going to overtime. But what we're seeing 7 games in is Darren DeVries is having a hard time finding a way to have Javon sit for long periods of time. Not that you want to sit him for long periods of time, but you want to sit him more than 2 minutes possible in a game, every game. So let's watch his minutes in the games in December. Hopefully we can kind of dial that back a little bit. KJ Tenner saved his best game for today. He made 3 floaters, had a great steal and transition pass to Amani for a dunk in the second half. I told you Ed Andre 3000 was in street clothes, so we got our first Harris rotation minutes, and it looked like he was nervous. I mean, he got a ball close to the basket, and he ricocheted off the backboard, didn't touch the rim from 2 feet. Got the offensive rebound, went back up, got a shot blocked. He did get another offensive rebound that led to an Akani basket. So you got to start somewhere. But as with the Gonzaga win, this was a team performance. It's amazing. I mean, it's always a team performance, right? But this team that has never played together, you're getting contributions from multiple people. And it's the starters for the most part. But before the season, you look at who's in this tournament and you say, all right, let's squeeze out a win. Let's get a 7th place finish. Still feel good about the season, but just know that you're up against a tough field. And yet West Virginia wins the first game. They win the game today. And listen, they get 2 out of this. If they take care of business in their next game, they can go into conference play with more wins than they had all of last season. They can eclipse last year's win mark with 3 months to play. It's not fair to compare it to. I'm just telling you where we were at to where we're going. And I optimistically predicted 9 conference wins. That felt like a lot. I was being optimistic. You watch these 3 games this week against good competition with the opportunity to add Jaden Stone at some point. Does 9 wins still feel optimistic? Maybe so. The Big 12 is tough, but it's not a crazy number. You don't watch this team this week and say 9-11 in the Big 12 is out of reach. Totally within reach. All right, so you leave this tournament with 2 wins. What are the concerns after this tournament? After an amazing week. This was an amazing week for the basketball program. Amazing week for the team. Amazing week for the coaching staff. But it can't be all roses. Like, what are the concerns? And the obvious one is depth. Like I talked about Javon's minutes. The bench this week, out of 135 minutes of basketball, the bench scored 11 points. So 3 overtime games, 11 points. I mean, Coach DeVries is not going full Tom Thibodeau. College Tom. He's not doing college Tibbs. He's not playing 6 guys. He's playing 8. And most likely we get into Big 12 play, the rotation is going to be 8 guys. Maybe 9. I mean, right now the bench is Ed Andre 3000. When he's healthy, the 2 freshmen. And as we've talked about, the freshmen, you feel better about their possible contributions in the Coliseum. Everybody plays better at home as far as role players than they do on the road. The question is, can they improve their contributions a little bit away from home? And this was a good experience for both Powell and Tenor. I mean, Powell today, he didn't score. Plenty of good looks. I don't see him forcing things offensively. The shots looked like they were going to go in, and just like a lid on the basket for Powell. So I think that's going to come. KJ Tenor in the Louisville game, just saucer eyes when they saw KJ in the game. He got picked on, but today composed, did not get picked on defensively. It's a tough ask, but it really puts pressure on the starters when the bench isn't able to contribute points on the board. So that's the big concern, the major concern. And Jaden Stone, who I wasn't impressed with, the only time we've seen him is in the exhibition game against UC. It's not like he blew me away there, but he's not a freshman. He's got 1 year of eligibility. He's an experienced guy. I'd just like to see him in the mix. Joe Yesufu, he only played 1 of the 3 games this week. I had him as a possible starter going into this season. I guess I underestimated his hip injury last year. Even if he's been cleared to go, how that affects his game. And he does seem a little bit slower than everybody else when he's been able to play. I'd just like to see what we have in Jaden Stone, with the guards especially, Javon playing all those minutes. Where can he get some relief? Obviously, you would think having another guard in the mix like Stone would be helpful. Has not been able to play, is considered day-to-day. Hopefully you can contribute at some point this season. And so depth, you leave this tournament saying we need a little more depth, even if DeVries shortens the bench. And then the other concern is Sincere Harris's offense. We're 7 games in. He's now 0 of 13 from 3. I saw him make at least 1 3-point shot against UC. So I've seen him do it. I'm sure he's making them in practice. And he's got to shoot at least a couple a game. If they're going to give him that shot, you got to throw it up. And it's already happening. Like, you watch the Pittsburgh game, they played like disrespectfully off of him. He couldn't make him pay. Arizona played off of him today. I mean, that's the move. That's the scouting report. The guy hasn't made a three. Give him some room. And he told us on the internet that he's going to make one. He's finding it. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Sincere Harris makes at least 1 3 this season. I mean, let me step further out on the limb. I think he's going to make more than 1 3. He might even make more than 1 3 in a game. He might. Listen, Toby Ohtani, it's not like he was killing it from 3. He found it this week. Made a bunch of 3s. Hopefully Sincere can find it in this month of December coming up. Because if he can keep you honest, if he can be another release valve, not that he has to shoot 40%. We've got multiple guys shooting over 40% from 3. We don't need Sincere to do that. We just need him. We need to sprinkle in one every once in a while. And if he does that, it opens up the offense even further because teams can't play off of him. Gives you more space. Are there any other concerns after this week? I mean, I want to say rebounding. They had some relapses in the Louisville game. But listen, they got out-rebounded in the opener by Robert Morris. And this week they out-rebounded Gonzaga and Arizona. So I it's wild to have 2 concerns. Now, the first one with the depth, you can get into that further and say you gotta have injury luck all season. If they're playing this much, are they, how much can they withstand as far as this type of workload? Specifically, Tucker, Javon, Amani played a bunch of minutes this week. So you can get further in the weeds on the depth part. Sincere is not going to finish the season over. But what else from these 3 games are you concerned about? Not concerned about coaching. Maybe, this is not how many games, I'm knocking on wood here, how many games are we going to have a 1-possession game with 30 seconds left and us with the ball? I guess if that's going to continue to happen, I'm not going to put this in the concern column, but you do want the last possession against Louisville and then the last possession today, you'd like to have those back. It wasn't the best. I mean, Tucker could make that shot. It was a contested shot. Could you have got a better shot? I mean, but let's talk it out. Sincere's right there today. Do you give it to him with 4 seconds left? Right now you don't. He hasn't found it yet. So you want it in Tucker's hands. But that's not a concern. I mean, if we're going to go at overtime again, I mean, 3 times in a season is a lot. We did it 3 times in 3 days. I didn't do anything. West Virginia did. And you know what? If I keep talking, if I've only got 2 concerns and I keep talking in this microphone, it'll end with me saying, here's how West Virginia goes to the Final Four. I mean, I need to take a cold shower. The next game for WVU, back in the United States, back in Morgantown, West Virginia. Next Friday, 7 p.m., ESPN2, Big 12, Big East battle. You leave the battle for Atlantis and get into another battle, this time against our old Big East foes, the Georgetown Hoyas. And kind of looking at the schedule in the preseason, you think, all right, they're going to take their lumps in The Bahamas come back, get a Georgetown team that is predicted to be bottom of the standings in the Big East, and maybe treat this as a bounce-back game. Instead, this week happens, you get 2 wins over 2 ranked opponents, and now you have to watch for a letdown. That's a good problem to have. Rather be watching for a letdown than a bounce-back. West Virginia is going to get some human votes. The computers are noticing and raising the expectations for WVU, but there's been 0 human votes so far in the AP or the coaches poll. So not that they're going to crack the top 25 necessarily. They're going to get votes based on what they did this week. And Georgetown's currently 5-1. Most likely we will be 7-1 going into the game Friday. Yes, Georgetown's cleaning up on teams that are sub 200 in Ken Pomeroy's computer. The only team ranked higher than the 200s was Notre Dame. They played them at Georgetown, and the Fighting Irish won by 21. Have not watched a lick of the Hoyas, but they're good at offensive rebounding, according to Ken Pomeroy's computer. Here's a stat that favors WVU in this matchup. It's the 3-point statistics for Georgetown. Georgetown's allowing opponents to shoot almost 37% from 3, and Georgetown's only shooting 29% from 3 themselves. So those 2 stats bode well for how WVU wants to play. And they'll be back at home, West Virginia, after being an underdog in all 3 games this week. They go back to being the favorite against Georgetown. And you just want to win. I mean, it actually, this game has a little bit of importance now. As you raise expectations, you don't want to give a game back against a Power 5 conference team in Georgetown. So I'd love a dominant performance. That would say a bunch. I just want to see a win. And if I'm being greedy, I'd prefer that win to happen after 40 minutes. You know? Love an overtime game. 3, it's everything in moderation, right? But what an amazing week. It's been fantastic. And there's still 24 more games in the regular season. And this week makes me even more excited about the next 24. That's it for this episode of Unreasonable Doubt. Listen on all the platforms, or just pick one: Apple Podcast, Overcast Podcast, Spotify Podcast, Pocket Cast Podcast, YouTube. Until next time, I'm Josh Witt. WVU for the 2024-2025 season, they have 5 wins and they have 2 losses.